Hey everybody, good afternoon. I'm John Rodgers, I work for DWR. So thanks Brian and Eric and everybody who put this together, by the way. I think this is the coolest venue that CDSS has played, so we appreciate it. But yeah, so I work for DWR here in Denver, and I'm going to talk about the online data and tools. Brian did already cover this, but I'm going to hit through it again just to do my version of like sort of credits, and then also just for your information, right? Where does this information come from? So as he talked about, some of the basic kind of high-level version of what's in HydroBase. You've got water rights, you've got stream flow, among other things, like the wet water, right? And then you've got diversion records, again, in terms of some fundamentals. So how does that stuff get into HydroBase? The water rights go in by virtue of a process called tabulation. It's kind of like a reserved word almost in DWR. When we talk about tabulation, it means somebody, the commissioners and the staff within the division offices, typing the water rights into HydroBase. They look at the decrees, they type in the transactions, and that's how the water rights are managed. The wet water, right, those are the hydrographers. Matt Hardesty is the chief of the DWR hydrographers, and there's hydrographers throughout the state, and they're the experts at measuring water. And there's telemetry and all that stuff involved in that. And then the administration is the commissioners. Fundamentally, water commissioners create diversion records. And that's how all that gets into HydroBase. And there's other folks in the division offices who, oversee river sections and things like that. And collectively, they create diversion records, basically on behalf of the division engineer. Okay, and then you got the crew. Brian talked about most of these folks. I'm in that crew. And then this is the group I really wanted to highlight and give credit. This is the OIT application development team. So they're our partners at the state. They're the folks who build the stuff for DWR. And those four individuals inside that box with all the names and all the players and all the everybody who contribute to this, those four individuals actually built basically everything that I'm going to show you. So they're a very talented team, and they deserve a lot of credit. And then the last thing I always like to highlight and make sure, this is you guys, right? I mean, in terms of all this all of our public-facing tools, they only become valuable when you use them. You know what I mean? The values only manifest when you make it, I guess. So you're a big part of this, and they got to work for you, or they're not working. And we appreciate the back and forth. I know there's been a little bit of pain and suffering with some of the stuff I'm going to show because it's been changing, but hopefully we all agree we're in a better place. And the dialogue with y'all is an important part of it. So we appreciate we appreciate your patience and all that, and we appreciate your feedback and the cooperative part of getting this stuff figured out. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the online tools. How do you find them? Well, there's at least 2 or 3 different ways to get in there. Brian mentioned the CDSS whatever. I always tell people water.state.co.us just because I think it's kind of easier to remember. But get in there how you can. If you go in this way, there's 2 different links from this page, but here's the page I'm talking about. This is like the stuff that I'm going to talk about for the next hour. How many people in the room have been here, kind of familiar with this or whatever? Nice. Awesome. I'm at the right meeting. So awesome. Well, we'll get through all of it. Was it good? Okay, so first, you probably know already, right? Above the line, those are the data sets. And below the line are tools. And not all the CDSS tools, but tools on this page are below that line. Again, all those data sets, that means HydroBase. So we can kind of skip through a couple of these and spend some more time in others. The aquifer determination tool down here. If you basically put in a location, if within certain of the aquifer basins, you put in your coordinates, and it'll tell you the aquifer characteristics beneath that location. And you can hit print, and there's a report. That's what that does. There's going to be a new skin on that, so to speak, and really within probably a month, you'll know, if you're a user, you'll notice it looks different, but the program itself is not changing with the new appearance. It's the original aquifer tool driven by Senate Bill 5. Was it 5? Anybody listening? You guys? All right, nice. And so there you go. Again, it'll look different, but the program is not going to change. So that's for folks who use that. This thing is the Colorado Information Marketplace, or SIM. Anybody at all use it? Okay, a couple hands. So I don't actually recommend it very much anymore, only because Okay, so what SIM is, I don't think I even have a screenshot of it, but it's a shared data set for the whole state. It's kind of like out of the governor's office. CDOT's in there, and education's in there, and everybody you could think of, and we're in there too. So it's another snapshot of HydroBase. And some not too many years back, it had some features that you couldn't get elsewhere, I think. Now, I think everything you can get out of SIM, you can get out of these pages I'm going to show you. So I don't really recommend it, frankly. If you find a feature that you can get out of SIM but not our stuff, I'd really be keen to hear it. I mean, nothing against SIM, it'll stay out there. But again, frankly, kind of a redundant snapshot of HydroBase. This is the location tools, new this past year. The deal with these are, you can put in a location, and this is, this is obviously a slide, so I can't click around, but if I was to click on that guy here, this drop down, there's any different kind of coordinate system you might have there, you can put your location in. So you might know lat long or UTM, you know, PLSS. You might have PLSS with distances. Whatever you got, you could put it in that way, and then boom, you see all the different outputs that come out of this thing, and it shows it on the map. So, you know, it's just a coordinates converter, courtesy of the state engineer. The idea, same thing here, it's a location distance calculator. You can put them in different forms and have 2 points, and it'll tell you the distance between the 2 points. And so again, it's not really like new tech or whatever, but you could print that and say, okay, here, officially, according to the state engineer's office, here's how far that well is from that river, or whatever it is you're trying to measure. So that's what those tools do. Notice that, or note that, for this one and the location converter, the coordinates converter, you can, after you drop the point on the map, you can move it around. You can scoot that thing around with your mouse and make it very precisely located where you want it. So those are the location tools, and then we're back here. Map Viewer is a full, free online GIS with all this data and a lot more, and Chris Brown is going to talk about it in the latter session here. Then we've got these web services, and they're a big deal. I think they may be, you know, for some folks, they're going to prove to be possibly the most useful thing that I'm going to talk about, you know, of all this stuff. And I'm going to get into them at the end, really. So just for, you know, a teaser or whatever, here's the story with what are those web services. They're a programmatic way to get HydroBase data. You can basically query the database directly through a really simple interface, and I'll show it to you. And that's what a web service is. And they used to be called SOAP. Now they're called REST. You know, they're acronyms for tech, whatever. It's data through the web is what those are. And everything I'm going to show you, all of the data pages up above the line, all of that is available as web services right now through here. So bear that in mind as we go through this. And like I said, and then we'll get into that at the end. We'll spend some time on it. The portal, it's how you get logged in. Here's the portal page, and you don't really need to spend a lot of time here. It's just another web page, really. The concept and the point of this is it's how you get logged in, and then certain things you can only do when you are logged in, you'd access through here. And this may evolve a little bit, but the point is this, you know, what's here is this. These bottom 3 items are just links out to other pages. That's all those are. These middle 3 items, again, they're related to being logged in, right? So as Brian said, you can go in here, you can click on the notification lists, and there's one called Tools and Technology News. He mentioned it. Sign up. You probably all are, and that's how you got invited to this thing. But that's an example. You got to be logged in, right? When we talk about these web services, there's a lot to that. I'm not going to talk about post services or anything today. There's a token you can manage if you think you need to get more data, because we have a throttle limit. You can't get like 10 million records every hour or whatever. So there's a token that limits that, and if you wanted to look at that, you could do that through here. Again, I'm really just going to skim over all that, but it's important stuff if you use these things. And then the next item, again, very important to people who are involved in this, is data submission from outside entities, right? A city or a utility or a power company or a water conservancy district or even just a user, and that whole deal. And we'll kind of touch on that just a little bit, but all of that goes on through this portal, long story short. And you know what? It's interesting. So the notion of outside entities, third parties, what do we call them? Non-DWR folks, submitting data ultimately goes into HydroBase. is not a brand new thing. It's gone on for, I don't know, since way before I was ever here. The technology is now evolving up along with all this other stuff. And so, you know, it's going to look different, and we're going to, and the kind of the user base is growing and things like that. The user experience is going to change, and then it's going to be in this new platform, and it's going to be better off. And if you notice, I don't know if anybody's ever looked around. Anybody in the room submit data to DWR? Nary? One, couple people maybe. So it used to, if you look on the site actually right now, and you would, if you click down in here, you'd hit the old stuff. It used to say data submittal. It still does say data submittal. But I wasn't sure which is the right word, submittal, submission, so we Googled it. And submittal means like you submit to us, you know, like you yield yourself and like bend a knee at, you know, Game of Thrones. And you don't have to do that. You can just submit your data. So data submission is what's covered there. And again, that's a whole, you know, really interesting and important stuff, but not necessarily so much for this group. So then I'm still on the portal, and you won't actually see these on the portal today. This is a little glimpse into the future. The purple clouds mean this is the vaporware, right? But it is coming. I mean, these are things we are going to build for sure. I'd give like sort of a 50-50 on this calendar year, and almost for sure by the end of next year. And what these components are is a couple different things. The one in the middle, it's just the idea of instead of searching one individual data set and then the other data set, you come in and you draw a box on a map, and you can see all of our data together in one place. And then you can bring them in, and you can put them on a graph, and you can have stream flow and groundwater level and rain and whatever, and bring them together on a graph. We can't do that today, but that's coming. The idea of like a My Dashboard or whatever is, okay, I've gone to all that trouble. I've got some stuff dialed up just the way I like it. I've got this section of the river, and then this other section, these 12 gauges I like to organize together, you know, data groupings that make sense to you as consumers, or if you're a farmer or whatever. And then you save them, right? You go to all that trouble to get them dialed up. You want to be able to save those. You wake up in the morning, and you click, and you look at your favorites and so on. So that's coming. And then the last thing associated with that, and the truth is this, what I just described, and the alerts I'm about to describe, those exist already in the tool set, but they're just kind of dated, and I don't know how many folks use them. I wouldn't recommend them. But once we build out these new ones, I certainly recommend them. And the last concept, if you didn't guess, it's, okay, so I've got these 100 gauges or whatever that I'm looking at, and you can give threshold values. You can say, here's my email, here's my cell phone, and I'd like to get a text message if, you know, Kirko goes above 1,000 CFS. You get the idea. A high or low threshold limits you could set. So that's the idea. So those are coming. Like I said, you won't see those today, and they're a little bit in the vapor. It's not a hard prediction, but they will come out, you know, in the next year or so. Okay. So now we're back. This is the main page. And let's get into it. Okay, cool. We're cruising. So first, where do we stand? Everything above the line is finished.
This is a 1980 movie directed by William.
That was really, did you hear that? It was telling me what is cruising. That could have gone a lot worse. I'm glad it was a 1950s movie. Okay. Everything above the line is finished except stations. And I'm going to I have a slide about what is stations, so bear with me if you don't know. But stations is current conditions. It's real-time stream flow and historical stream flow. It's all the telemetry data coming in. That's stations. We've not yet updated that one. If you're users of the site, you know that. You click around on stations, and you're seeing the existing legacy stuff that works wonderfully and is now due for an upgrade. But we saved it for last because it's really the hardest stuff. You know, it's the most complex. It's the most dynamic data set. And I'm sure it's going to have the highest amount of demand. We're really close on stations. We should have made it by now, to be honest, but we didn't. It'll be, you know, spring, summer. I don't know. There's some complications in terms of how much we try to fix all at once. But stations is still coming. It's the only one still coming. The other thing is this. We've already built this thing for dam safety. It's done, really. It just hasn't been shown to the public yet, essentially. And once we turn that on in another month here, you can look at dams and livestock tanks, non-jurisdictional, jurisdictional dams. That'll all be information in there. So, cool. And then so this is what it looks like today. Now here's what I wanted to convey. This is what it's gonna look like. basically. This is kind of a cheesy little mock-up of what it's going to look like. Because here's the deal. You see agriculture? Agriculture is just a link to an outside source. We used to like reskin it, and through this we kind of thought, why are we even doing that? So now if you click on agriculture, you just go to that website. It's USDA or somebody. And so we're just going to drop that button before you know it, right? I mean, we don't need to just have buttons for other sites. And climate stations is just going to become another station. It's going to become part of stations. When you're searching stations, you can find climate stations. So those two buttons are gone, and in came dam safety. So that's basically a pretty good look at the hydro-based data set that we're going to sort of finish with, right? And just to get on the same page, we're doing pretty good on time. Calls are calls. I mean, I'm not going to, you know, they're the tool with which water commissioners, with the authority of the division engineer, you know, administer the river. They put on a call, and if you're upstream and you're junior to that call, you let your water go by. You guys all know all about it. That's the calls data set. We'll have dam safety. Groundwater, Kevin and Andy are going to talk about. Water rights, Carolyn is going to hit on a little bit. Well permits is what you think it is. It's all the well permits data. It's a huge data set. It's another one that's been a very heavy hitter from the public side. And it's every well that's ever been permitted in the state, and they're coming in new every day, of course. And then you've got stations and structures. How many people know the difference between stations and structures? Are you sure? So here's the deal. They're related, and it's not that complicated. I put this simple thing together to try to summarize it very simply, right? Everything in hydro-base is managed as a structure. So everything you think of like, oh, it's a structure, yeah, that's a structure. And then other things like a reach, that's a structure. An AUG plan, that's a structure in hydro-base. They get WDIDs, they're structures. You'll find them in the structures data set. In Division 2, they have farm groups and farm units. Those will be WDID structures. So you get the idea. They're mostly really just structures, and there's some other stuff too. And structures get diversion records. Right? If that's how you think of this stuff, you absolutely got it. And then structures can have measuring points. Not every structure has a measuring point, but they can have one or more than one. And then a given measuring point can have a station. So stations are the telemetry. Stations are the measured stuff. And if a station exists in hydro-base, it is associated with a structure. Right? So again, not every structure has a station, but if you're a station, you're part of a structure. And it varies. Some structures, the only reason it's in hydro-base is to accommodate a station. Others have water rights and diversion records and everything else, and they have stations that are associated with them. So that's the relationship with all that stuff. Like, again, you know, the obvious thing with stations, stage. If you're thinking about stage and discharge and all that, those are stations. And again, that data, was I going to say that here? I'll just say it. The deal with station data in the database and ultimately through the website is all this telemetry feeds come in, and raw data comes in at all the way down to hour increments, 15-minute increments. I think we expose it at hour increments. Anyway, that's the raw data, and we preserve that forever. You could see the raw data for 2005, and after each year, I think it's in the kind of at the end of the following year, the hydrographers go through and they do what's called working the record, right? They work the record. They go through that stream flow data and they work it and they clean it up and they modify it if necessary. I mean, you can imagine, right? It's their expertise. They go, I need a shift in the curve, or the thing was screwed up as an error, or whatever it is. And they work that record and they get it right. And they say, boom, that's the true stream flow record. And I'm going to certify it or whatever. And they publish that. And now that's a saved separate data set, time series data set for that station beside the raw data set, right? And that's all gets conveyed. That'll all be on this. You can get it all now with the old stuff, and I'm sure a lot of you do, and you'll be able to continue to get all that going forward. And that's the story with stations. Okay, cool. So we're back to our page. So let's go into calls. We'll click into administrative calls. We'll click there. We'll click on historical calls. You land on the historical calls search page, okay? This is the basic lay of the land. Maybe you guys all already know this. The left-hand side is your search criteria. I've said South Platte for the last couple of weeks, and I set the administrative scenario to call only. And then you hit search, and back come the results, right? And so there they are in this table. Yesterday when I ran this, there were 9 actual calls in Division 1. Okay, cool. So what about this? A couple kind of pointers, I guess, for these search pages. First most pointer is this. Don't miss the more options thing. Particularly with the other data sets. Every data set can be a little different. Most of the data sets you have, for example, an address. You can type in an address. You could type in coordinates, put in a WDID, things like that. So it may be the most important search criteria for you is kind of hidden here under more options. So don't miss it. See what's under more options. The next tip is this. Once you're looking at any of these tables, you need to be aware of how it works. So click on the 3 little dots here, right? And you get this drop down. And then you click on columns, and there's a list of columns. And the reason that's important is because we hide columns by default sometimes. We happen to hide that one on this page. If you go through all the pages and you do this and you look and you go, yeah, sure enough, those suckers hid some columns. And why? Well, the thing is, it's like you look at some of these data, right, and it's 50 columns wide, and all this coordinate information and everything, and we want you all to have that, but maybe it's kind of overwhelming. So there's just a kind of arbitrary judgment calls as to how much shows up. So be aware of that. And if you're looking at a table and going, I could have sworn they had, the call priority WD, well, look for it in the column list. When you hit export, they all go out. But again, it was a judgment call as to how to do these screens. So be aware of all that. And then the rest of the thing with that is, so now, okay, cool, I can unhide that column. I can hide these other columns. I can customize this table the way I want it to look. I can come in here, I can sort it, I can do a filter. You can lock columns off to the left. You can grab right here if I clicked and scooted. You can rearrange them. You can get it all dialed in just the way you want it. So if you spend enough time in any one of these pages, it's worth doing that. Do it. Get it all dialed out just the way you want. And be logged in before you do that. Because if you're not logged in, you blew it. You spent all this time getting it dialed, and then you're pissed because you can't save it. You're logged in, and you get it all dialed, and then you'll see that behavior only when you're logged in. And you can save your table settings. And the guys went ahead and made it a Cadillac, and you can save 3 different table settings for each table, So it could be handy, right? I look at it this way for some compliance assessment. I have these other fields. Who knows? The point is you can do it if you want to. So get the tables dialed out as you want to, that you can customize all that stuff as long as you're logged in. There's a map. Here's a map. There's map options up there you can play with. You can click on the stuff and they pop up and you can see additional detail. There's all that going on. And then lastly, there's help. So for each of the data sets has a little bit of it has different content. I mean, it's the same deal basically, but different content for help. Like for example, in this case, we've got the administrative call standards, since this is the call data set. And there's a user guide, and there's a data dictionary, and there's a way you can write us emails here and say, if you have a question or a comment about a particular page, you can shoot that to us here through help. So that's the kind of lay of the land with all of the pages. Everything I just talked about is sort of universal to all the pages. Okay, so here we're gonna simulate as if look at that. So I clicked on the menu, and then we're going to click on, we're on historical calls, but we're going to go to this guy, call analysis, because these are important. I'm not going to grind through every data set, but I do want to show you these two call analysis tools, and then we're going to look at structures a little bit and REST services. So these call analysis tools, how many people in the room have used the call analysis tools at all? You should check them out. I mean, it depends on what you do for a living, obviously, but they streamline a lot of accounting and a lot of analysis stuff. And the deal is, up until just, a year ago or so, within Hydrobase, the structures were not geolocated on the stream. Now they are, right? So Chris Brown and Doug Stenzel and the team have the structures now geolocated in the National Hydrography data set by stream mile. So the structures know where they are now. And that breakthrough allows for this kind of call analysis to happen programmatically, because who's upstream, who's downstream. So we have that now. So Doug and Mikhail built this super cool stuff. So you can come in here and you can just say, here's a particular water source. I want to pick on Fountain Creek, include my tribs, pick a moment in time, let's say last summer, and go. And the result set here is every water right by structure, right? So it's every structure, and then an individual structure is broken down if they have multiple water rights. So it's every water right by stream mile by water source. It's a lot of great information. And then for each one of those water rights, were you in or out of priority in that moment in time? And so there's a lot of good data there. And the table down below is what it's cut off, but you can tell those are the calls. And so that table, the second table, is every single call that was in place in that moment in time on that water source with its tributaries. So it helps for accounting, I think, in terms of jumping to that information. You know, from an operational standpoint, you can imagine, like, yeah, this is my water right here. You see this little option, you use current date and time. So you could set that. You could set up all this stuff and save that. And so you wake up in the morning and you look at your water right and you know whether or not you're in priority. If you have the current date time thing set. So that's water source call analysis, okay? It's a water source for a moment in time. This next one, oh, I wanted you to see this too. This is heads up on, like, so here I have the water source drop down. If you ever see this and you wonder what's going on, we've got the name and text, you know, the name of the water source, and then this next string of numbers is the GNIS, geographic name, information, something, and it's a unique identifier, right? Because you can see it right here. How many 4-mile creeks are there? How many dry creeks are there? So that's the unique identifier from the geographic name service. And then inside of parentheses, those are the districts. Those are the water districts that water source, one or more water, districts. So that's the story of that. So I picked Fountain Creek and I ran this thing already. So now we'll go to this one. Excuse me. So instead of water source, this is structure call analysis. And more accurately, of course, right, it's a water right call analysis. So in other words, here we go. You start on the left-hand side, you start on the top, you say, let me do a search. And if you just plug in the WDID there, that's fine. But here I said, oh, I know it has Empire Ditch in the name. Great. Back comes a list. I picked the one I wanted. That's the structure. Yep, that's the WDID. That's the one I meant. And when I click on that, you see the water rights for that structure show up. And then you have to say, well, which one of those water rights do you want to do your analysis against? Because that's how water rights work. So I picked this particular one with that administration number, 1936. And then you say you can specify a period of time. So you could just do a moment if you feel like it. You could start and end at the same minute, I guess. But you can do all last year or all last summer or all last decade or whatever, right? You can do a period of time for that individual water right. And then you hit the button in the corner which says show priority. And boom, come your results. And the first table up top, I mean, I don't know how, I'm probably pushing the limits of what's really legible, but you could use the thing, obviously. And like up top, it just summarizes so that for an entire period of time, that admin number you inquired about was out of priority 27% of the time. And then you can break this whole table down. You can look at all days. You can look at all the stuff. And what it amounts to is for days where that right was called out or was superseded, you can see what called it out. So all that information is up there. And then the comment about this, and this applies to all the pages. Well, the general comment is all the pages. And when you set a bunch of criteria, and whether it's just a search or it's an analysis thing like these pages, you get that all dialed in and then you hit the button. At that point, the URL up top has all your arguments in it. So you can save that, right? That's nice. You can just save it as a bookmark and it'll be there the next time. You could email that to somebody and it'll render on their end the same as you're looking at it. And then the thing, when you're talking about the call analysis, it gets really kind of cool. And when we talk about REST services, you'll see the relationship because it's the exact same concept of passing in arguments. And when you're talking about call analysis, once you figure out how to read that, right, and of course you can't do it sitting here, but when you look at that and you parse that thing out and start to understand the arguments in that URL, you can use this for scenario planning. You could plug in an admin number that doesn't exist and see how it comes back. You can pick a location. So what's cited up inside of here is an admin number in a location, and then your period of time you're running against. So you could put in an imaginary admin number, and you could pick a real location for a structure that's adjacent to something you're thinking about. So there's So the point is, you can do some scenario planning now, and there's some potential there we're going to build out to make that a little more intuitive. But just so you know, the URLs right now have a lot going on. The very minimum they have going on is they save all your arguments, and you can keep it. But get to know that a little bit better, and there's some potential power for that in there for scenario planning. Okay, so that's the story with the 2 call analysis pages. And then we're back. Okay, we're going to go into structures. So I've stepped into the structures page, and I just did a basic search here. I said, give me all the reservoirs in the South Platte Basin. Once again, you can see those arguments up in the top. Here's a glance at the more options for structures, because again, you don't want to miss it. Maybe, really you just have an address of a house, or whatever. You have a permit number. Plug them in, and you found your stuff. Or if you need to do more broad kind of search, then yep, you can use these criteria. Back came all my results. And I go, yep, that looks like my guy. That's Linda's Pond. So a couple more comments about searching in general. There's a count down here at the bottom, right? We have 3,500 records in this result set. If you did show me every structure in the whole state, you can exceed the threshold of allowed results to show up on the screen, and it'll tell you that. You'll get a message that says, hey, you exceeded your limit. And that is what it is. I mean, if you get that limit, that message, that throttle message, is you exceed the limit, but hey, there's the result you were looking for, that's fine, you can click on it, there's nothing wrong with it. But make sure you don't try to consider that a complete data set, right? Because it got cut down. If you're trying to do, I want to know every, irrigation water right in the county or something, you can do that. If it comes back and it's not throttled, then boom, you can export that to a legit query. But if you get that throttle message, you don't know which records got cut off or anything. So the point is you'd have to rerun your query to where your results are not being throttled. But really, if all you're trying to do anyway is find something, oh yeah, there's Linda's Pond, that's the one I was looking for, then cool, you click on it. And now here we are on the detail page for that. When you hit export, you get every column for all 3546 records. I didn't mock it up, but if you exceed the throttle, it's kind of handy because it'll tell you this. We're only showing you 20,000 of 185,422. If you were to hit export, you'll get 20,000. The key here is, again, research or use the REST services. Use the web services. If you need 180,000 records, web services. So we'll talk about those. So here I am. I've jumped in. We jumped into Linda's Pond. We're having fun. The water's nice. And then we go, oh, wait, I didn't need Linda's Pond. And check it out. If you look at, in the case of the structures pages, the last component of that URL is the WDID. And so it's kind of handy knowing that, because you go, oh, wait, I didn't mean to be Linda's Pond. I just found the other WDID. We'll just type it in there, and boom, you can navigate from structure to structure just by typing the WDID. So here we are on this structure, and let's kind of take the lay of the land a little bit. So, the home page, or the tab you land on, is the structure overview tab. It's got some handy information. Again, we may click around in here. If you click on these, they'll collapse and stuff to give you more use of your real estate on the screen. Kind of the main thing to know about these, really, I worry, is people are aware that these are tabs. Oh, shucks, sorry. These are tabs across the top, and probably every one of y'all knew that, and how could you miss it or whatever, but, it's people who maybe aren't familiar, it's easy to miss stuff. So those are tabs. Here's image documents, for example. Another thing I think might be, unfortunately, a little easy to miss, and we're trying to make them more obvious. But you got to click over here, right? These different the image documents each associate with a different template. There's these different template groups. And so you can't show them all at once. So the users have to know, oh, I want to look at water court stuff, click. And then it shows the water court stuff. Is that obvious? I don't know. Now all of you know, of course, and you can spread the word. So really, again, in terms of detail pages, they're hopefully straightforward as long as you know kind of how to click around. Here we are on Diversion Records. Now, Diversion Records, we could spend easy an hour by itself on Diversion Records, and we won't, but here's kind of some overview stuff. So we're going to drill into this Diversion Records tab, and be aware, right, out of the gate, whether here or through this menu, you have different ways to look at the Diversion Records. And if time allows me, we'll click around for real. I can't really do it justice here, so I'm not going to try real hard, to be honest, but you can summarize, you have, in terms of the diversion records that exist in the database, there's diversions, which, as you all know, are a whole lot more than just river diversions, right? I mean, you could be pumping like into a recharge pond, and that would be a diversion record. So diversion is a term of art or whatever, and it means a lot more than just diverting from the river. But those are, typically CFS values, right? Those are diversions. And the summary versus time series are just two different ways of looking at them. And then you have stage volume records, and then these guys here, these comments, are the annual water commissioner, like, diversion comments. And they might say stuff like not in use. And that's the nature of the data. And so you can explore all that here with this record type dropdown. You can walk through these various time steps for the data. And there's a lot to, I'm going to point in just a second here to a how-to manual, because that's kind of the whole point, is there's a lot to this. And there's a manual that hopefully helps you. But I'll just kind of keep talking at you and, hopefully a little bit helpful. So with regard to the time steps, you need to understand how the data rolls. If you click on year, you will get the aggregation of every single record for that structure, for that water class type, for the whole year, whether it was recorded on an annual basis, whether it's recorded on a daily basis, a monthly basis, or an annual. If you pick year, you'll see the aggregation of all of them. If you pick month, you'll see the aggregation of days and months, but if there's an annual only reading, you won't see it. If you pick day, you will see only day only reading, so you wouldn't see month and year. So you have to understand the data a little bit, because I used to say, oh, just click on day, and you're at the finest level of granularity, and grab all the water classes and return. Well, that's not quite right, because you'd miss month and year. So you need to understand the nature of the data itself a little bit in terms of the time step. So leave it at that for the moment. The other thing that's pretty cool here to pay attention to, so I came in, we'll go live here in a few more minutes, but you click on water classes and you'll get a drop down of every, let me back up 1 second. First, look at these dates. There's information on this page, right? Just when you initially come in here. This full record here is telling you the full period of record for that structure. The very first time any water class had a diversion record to the most recent that any water class had a record. That's the full period of record. And then that's our default in these drop-down time windows. And then we look here and we say, oh, look, there's 20, stop doing that, there's 27, wait for it, 27 records. There are 27 water classes associated with this structure for its full period of record. And if I was to zoom in a little bit and say, oh, I only want to see 2010 to 2015, you would see the count of water classes fall, because it's responding to that. You said, no, I only want to see these years. Well, then the list will only show you water classes that had diversion records in those years. So there's a lot going on there just in terms of your searching. And there's a lot going on in terms of getting information back out of it, I guess. And then the next thing I was going to say, so here, if you click the little I, right, so you're looking at these water classes. And, you might not have all the codes memorized, or they say from another WDID. Well, how would you know what that WDID? If you click the little I, up comes a pop-up that just describes that water class in English. So that's what's going on there. I don't, how many folks in the room are familiar with the whole, what is a water class? Anybody kind of, so I mean that, and again, you could spend 8 hours or something on that, but what it basically amounts to is, here's your structure, it's got its water rights, and there's a relationship, but it's not one-to-one. It's an art, where the commissioner says, I need these specific water classes to characterize the color of water that moves through that structure. So if you have the most simple thing ever, right, it's a head gate on the river and it goes to irrigation. Source one, use one, that's it. But as you all know, a lot of structures get a whole lot more complicated than that. And so you can get many, look at this guy, he's got 27 different water classes that the commissioner uses to characterize the source and the from and the use and the type, and if there's an associated group and all this, and this whole art of the water class, how water classes work. And of course, again, there's a lot to it. But in terms of just looking at your data, here it is. Okay, so you can come in here, I clicked on water classes, you can grab individual water classes, maybe you want to look at all of them, maybe you want to look at some of them. I just clicked these 4, I hit search, And I can see them as a table, I can see them as a graph. So there you go, so probably enough about water classes. And then lastly, here I clicked on help, here's the help page, and there's how to get structured diversion records from CDSS. So open that, it's like a 5-page little Google thing, and hopefully would get you through, what you need to do if you're trying to get diversion records. All right, cool. So now we're going to talk about the REST services. So all I've done is navigate it back to the main page, and now I'm on the REST web services page. Here's what this guy looks like. And what you see here is, where's my mouse? These are the data sets, right, that we were just talking about. There's the calls, there's the call services, diversion records, structures, you get the idea. So these are all the different ones available to me. I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to click on Administrative Calls Generator. And you land on this page. How many folks have used the REST services in here? Anybody? Hey, look at that. Nice. Okay, well, for you to use them, anyway, the page doesn't exactly look like this. This goofy little kind of dotted line I put in here is like truncates. The idea was to show you everything kind of on one slide. There's a bunch of stuff I cut out, in other words. But the basic concept is, cool, here I am on this URL generator for administrative calls. I can set the format how I want it. I can set the criteria. And again, there's more criteria I've cut out of here, but for simplicity, I just want to know all the calls in Division 1. And then you click on Create URL. And, actually before that, so yeah, you can see the behavior of the thing. You make your arguments in there and click around in there a little bit. You click Create URL. Just click there under that thing. And there's a URL. And back comes the URL that I've created and that this thing creates for you that has those arguments in them, like I said. And then you click on Retrieve Data. And that's the idea, data. That is the result set. I ran it yesterday. There's 9, there were 9 calls in Division 1 at that time. It shows you the timestamp of that grab, and it shows you the data set. So, this data set here is, I don't know, it's called Pretty Print. There's JSON and there's XML y'all might have heard of. There's a CSV format, which is what it sounds like. You can download it as a CSV. You can select a GeoJSON format, which is basically the same stuff. It's a JSON format, but it's got its geo coordinates in it, so you can import that into a spatial-based tool set. The point is, these may not, it's not particularly attractive. I clicked on Pretty Print. I'm not sure that's especially pretty to the human eye, right? Like, you don't necessarily want to look at your data that way. But to a database, or to a spreadsheet, or to a model, or any kind of computer, any kind of tool, that's pure data, right? That's a good data grab. Your tool, it may need XML, it may need JSON, but the idea is, if you've got a model, or any kind of counting spreadsheets or anything like that that need to know, say, the call, for a simple example, or maybe a water rights analysis or anything like that, you can embed these calls, these web service requests, into your model, into your spreadsheet, and that way every single time you open it, it's HydraBase. You've queried HydraBase right now. It's the exact same concept as you went into the website and you clicked around, you filtered for the calls you wanted, and you hit export CSV and you plug them in, right? But you don't have to do that anymore. You just grab these guys. And the value in it that Scott Cuthbertson's always talking about is, the point is, anytime you grab HydraBase data, even if you go to our site and it's awesome and you get everything and you hit CSV and export, the minute you've hit that export, you now have a copy of HydraBase. You have a copy of that data, and it can change. There's always new records coming in. The other thing is that records will change. If a commissioner gets a phone call from somebody and, hey, I think you made a mistake, something's wrong with whatever, and they'll look back at the record. DWR is very good about making the record right, and so the record's open. The HydraBase content is subject to change for past records. And so I'll say a couple more things about that, but bottom line is, if you're using these REST services, you're getting the most recent data. You're querying HydraBase live. So it's just kind of fresh as you can get, or however you want to say it. Plus, there's an efficiency to it. So I'm here on this web page. I clicked on the Help tab on the right there. There's an example here of a Google Sheet. You guys are welcome to open. It's all right out there on the site. You can check it out. And I don't know how well you can read the formula there, but it's nothing but, it says import JSON, and then it's got that REST service URL request we created from the other page. Import JSON, plug that thing in, boom, and that spreadsheet now has all the most recent calls every time you hit refresh. So that's the concept of the web services. And then last thing about the web services. This is more, any one of the pages has however many fields. The amount of criteria you can filter by varies depending on the data set. But all of them have these two things on them. And the foremost one to understand is modified. The modified field refers to the date that the record was modified. And so it could have been when it was created, yesterday, and it's going to have a modified date of yesterday. But you could have a record from 5 years ago that got changed yesterday, and it'll have a modified date of yesterday. So the point is, if you're hitting Hydrobase and you're trying to generate, like, oh, I need all the water rate data for this district or something, you can pull all that data down. I mean, there's a throttle. Like I said, we try to manage. We don't really, there's some strategic approach in terms of how much of Hydrobase you try to have locally, or how much you would tell yourself you're going to pull every time you come in here. But the concept would be, if you need a reasonable amount of data, pile it all up into your local database, and then you can use these web services, say, okay, now I'm going to hit Hydrobase every midnight, and I set the modified field to yesterday, and so every time it runs, it gives me anything that's changed in Hydrobase, right? And again, it could be a brand new record. Hey, look, there's 5 more diversion records for this structure this morning. And it could be, oh, look, the commissioner changed a record from last summer. What do you know? Well, it had a modified date, and so you'll pull that in, and you'll keep your data current that way. That's the idea. That's the deal with modified. So it's kind of a big deal in terms of making it hopefully more achievable for folks to know they've got the latest without trying to grab Hydrobase in its entirety every midnight, which is kind of not sustainable. So that's what modified's all about. The last one, maybe a little less critical, but it's pretty handy if you're using these services on a browser. You're getting to know them, like you're personally bringing them back and looking at them, which again is not really the point, but you do that to get to understand them and so on. Page size can save you. If I was to go in right now and say, show me every structure in the state or in Division 1 or something, it's a lot of stuff. And if you try to get it all to come back on your browser will bog down real hard. So you'll probably forget all about this, but if you're messing with these services and you find yourself staring at your browser and going, what was John talking about? Page size, what you do is put it at like 10 or 1 or whatever, and it'll still show you the count of all the records, but your browser will only render those first 10. It'll make your life a lot easier, trust me. You'll remember it when you get in there if you're banging around in there. So that was the last of it. We can click around in the site a little bit, because it's, I don't know, it's more fun to see it live, I guess. But honestly, at this point, I'll pause, because that was everything I'd planned to go through. Are there specific questions? Yeah, Matt. So we're going to go to the REST page. Matt has a question about REST services. So I'm going to navigate in the menu, and I'm going to go to REST services. And what were you thinking about, like structures? Yeah, good question. So let me repeat the question, and then I'll basically admit that I don't really have a good answer. Hang on. Hey, you know what we're going to do, though? We're going to set page size to 10, because somebody told us that was a good idea. Okay, now we're going to see every structure in Division 3, I guess I just said. So it comes back like this. What is this, XML? It's either XML or JSON, I forgot. But they come back in these like machine-friendly formats is what Matt was asking about, right? Like who wants to read that, That's machine-friendly, so to speak. Not so much human-friendly. How do you kind of take it from there? And I don't have like a short answer for that. I mean, again, you can get some information on that if you come right here, bear with me, here, and all you got to do is click on Tech Info and Help. And we've got examples here for a Google Sheet and an Excel sheet where you just import the argument or the URL, you import the statement, and then boom comes the data, and Excel and Google know how to parse it out into cells. And so if you had a model or a program or something like that, you just have to have something that converted it into, it's the same concept as comma separated values. Yeah. So the question was, is there any chance that Northern's data will make it into Hydrobase directly? I mean, I think the answer is yes. And check it out. So if we go right now to stations, Here, let's do this. So we go to stations. Yeah, we're doing good. Well, so so here we are. We'd be in the South Platte Basin, of course, and so probably folks are familiar with this page. And this page, so this is station current condition data right now. And again, the data is not going to change really, but we're going to make it look different mostly and have a little more functionality. But in terms of this data, like here's Northern right now, and for the Boulder Reservoir storage level, and we cite Northern as a partner on that record. So some of that data is coming into Hydrobase today. But Kelly Thompson made the point. Kelly's going to talk, and I don't know if that's like on your radar, but there are TS Tool can grab data that you may not be able to see here. But I tell you what, let me answer it this way. When we're finished, the vision is all the station data that DWR ingests, whether it's streamflow reservoir or climate, they're all just stations, and they will all be made visible through this stations page. So the plan is not to hold anything back. In fact, this is a line I meant to say earlier. It's true. In terms of the whole concept of this thing, when you're at the search level for one of these, you're searching for structures or anything, that's very comparable to what you'd find in SIM right now, just kind of gross level searching and then so on. And then when you click into our stuff and you go to the detail level, or later when you come into the final newly built stations page, the concept is, and the reality is, we're showing everything inside a Hydrobase. That's the idea. When you get down to a detail level page, there's everything. I mean, we hold back, I think, like some owner names and maybe phone numbers or something, but this is all public data. And the mission here, what we've done, is to just give up every single thing that's in the database so that we're just not holding anything back. And if you want to find it, you can find it. So in the case of climate data, we would show it if we get it in. Here's the deal. The question was about when you're talking about structures, what is available in terms of exports, basically, and in terms of reports. So here's the deal. I'm on this particular structure. You notice I could be on any one of these tabs, and across the top is the word report. So if I click on that report, that's a structure summary report as a PDF. And it may or may not hit exactly the marks it used to hit, to be honest. I haven't been around the state that long, and some stuff people ask, oh, we used to have. It's like, I don't even know what we used to have. But here's what we do have now. And you can come through and you can say, these are the components that I want. Maybe you just want everything, or maybe you want a subset. And then you hit generate, and boom, comes a PDF. So that's one of the products. And again, Diversion Records is right here, water classes and totals. You can export them in that form as a PDF. Additionally, when you're on the Diversion Records tab, I don't have to hit search, but I'll do it anyway. Show you some cool graph. Okay, so when you're on the Diversion Records tab, no matter what you've just searched for, it doesn't matter. Down here on the bottom left is this box. This is Diversion Records. Here, let me show you some. Oh, never mind, sorry. So here we are. I can generate Diversion Records, and I can do it two ways. We'll do PDF again. And this, we can look at one. It's a PDF, but it's only Diversion Records, and it's a little bit different format than the other one was, for example. And for example, all right, we'll just do monthly. We'll do annual and monthly, and there's this cool kind of gadget. You can say, show me an appendix of the water class definitions. Because again, because, not everyone has memorized all the different water class combinations. So here we go, and this is a PDF report of Diversion Records. It's in this cross-tab format, and we can scroll through, and then these are the definitions of all the different all the different water class codes that are in that data set. And when I hit that output there, I was on PDF, I specified a time period. And we've got that throttled way down just by default, so folks click it and aren't really knowing what they're doing. It doesn't take half an hour, but you could go all the way back to the beginning of time and say, spit it out, and it would take a few minutes, but you'd get the data back. And so that's PDF form. And then lastly is really the exact same thing. Well, the same data, and it's in CSV format. So actual comma separated values, you could put it in Excel. And same deal, you can say, give me the whole period of time or a subset. I want which of these different types of diversion records. push them out to a CSV file. Yeah, please. So the question was an observation, I guess 19-something, I don't even know. 1950 was a cutoff for the recording of diversion records for some structures, and whether we'd go back in time and create historical diversion records pre-1950, I don't know a thing about it, to be honest. My thought would be this: no, I don't think the DWR has like a mission to go back in time and try to do something like that as a general mission or something. But if there was some case, I mean, we do whatever was, a more realistic scenario could certainly be, oh yeah, there's some case and there's some water rights and somebody needs to have diversion records to put into a model. I mean, it's conceivable. I'm sure there's no policy against it or anything, but I've never heard any conversations about that in my couple of years here. The question was about non-state personnel, people, third-party people, putting data into Hydrobase, because I know we mentioned that a couple times today. And I want to, okay, this isn't really worth searching, but I'm going to do it anyway. This slide right here, this little idea, right, of like, oh, see that box, third party, and there's a third party. This is obviously very simple, but the idea is they go through the DWR staff. So what it amounts to is this, like, we have folks feeding telemetry data to us right now, measured stations. And in that case, it's DWR hydrographers who know who that person is, know what that station is. They say, oh yeah, that's legit working station. We're going to accept that into our data set. And we show that as a data set, and it shows the partner, just like Northern or something. But it's going through DWR. Then you've got a case like USGS, which is kind of an exception. But most of these third parties, if you're the idea of diversion records is kind of perhaps not intuitive, but the idea would be if you're a commissioner and you've got some structures on your river and they're managed by, this utility, and that utility has stations on those or has measurement devices, and the commissioner says, well, look, that measurement is my diversion record, and under that commissioner's control and everything, that data can pass straight into Hydrobase for the commissioner to approve. So I don't want to give any false impressions. For many years before today, there have been non-state people putting stuff into Hydrobase. I won't use air quotes. They're putting it into Hydrobase. And it's DWR staff who approve that and control that and all the rest. So there's a really tight, I'm not sure if that was the origin of the question, but yeah, it's not like somebody could just say, oh, this is my diversion record last month and I'll upload that to Hydrobase. Looks pretty good to me. It's under the control of DWR. Was there another question in the back? So the question was for structures. So water commissioners record their diversion records in field books, especially historically. They can now record directly into a handheld app into Hydrobase. I mean, Hydrobase is a repository, and they use these field books historically, especially going back like pre-1950. So the question was, if you're talking about a structure and you want to know historical records that are not digitally in Hydrobase, can you find the field books through image docs? Well, I'll tell you this. When you come into a structure and you click on image docs, all of the image documents in Hydrobase associated with that structure are made visible here. Oh, so the conversation for the record here is I didn't know this. There are at least some water commissioner field books. I mean, I'd be surprised if like all of them are in there, but I don't know a lot about this. So there are at least some historical water commissioner field books that have been digitized and uploaded to Laserfish, but they're tagged at the district level, which makes sense, but that means you wouldn't find them at the structure level. So you guys are teaching me stuff. I mean, I don't have a good answer to this, but it's a good conversation. And if there's a way to, integrate it more intelligently at the structure level, we could get there. So again, as always, I appreciate that. Without a doubt. And the only reason I say it like that is I don't know the state of the data, right? If those electronic files in Laserfish are not distinctly associated with every structure, then that's a level of effort that would have to be, crossed. But it's still a good idea. I mean, it's cool. I appreciate the thoughts. Any more? Like one more? We were going to have a little chatter at the end, but so cool. Thanks a lot, everybody.